Hello and welcome to another night shift. My name is Yazil, and today we want to see if we can save the player positions. So for that to show you that, I opened the Unity with the running client, and as you can see here, we got a player running around, and here you can see the server, which is in debug mode on. And you can see, as we had before, we just walk and until we reach the speed, the data will be transferred and then not any longer, except for the turns. But what we notice, if we stop moving, we get one tag here for saving the player position. So if we log out now, so we do that and we just stop there. Player is logged off, and if we go here on our second player, we don't see him any longer. But if we log in again, so let's start that. To log in. Oh, that was 2 on the other, so 1 So here's the player again. He pops up at the safe position, and if we go there, we see the player is saved on the position where we logged out last, and also it's direct everything on the screen. So the little issue we had when somebody logged in, he has to move before we see him, is gone also. So, and yeah, well, let's get started. And for that, I stopped this whole stuff. And first of all, we go into our workbench and we make ourselves a new table. I called it table player position, and I have it open here. I got the player ID, and it's a primary key. It's not null and it's unique. And we got the float position X, Y, and Z for the positions. It's float, and just they can't be null or can be null because we direct write them when we create the player. It's the player plugin project. There it is. Yeah, come on. So in the player project, player plugin project, in the player plugin, we go to the save function, and that's all known. We're gonna save that, save in these, and after we did that, we gonna try another function, and that's here. We create the 3 variables, the float X, Y, and Z with our starting position. Later on, we maybe get them out of a database, and so we can have different starting points like dungeon startings and portals or whatever fixed in these database. But for now, we're just going and make that hard coded. Then we go and select star from table player pos, where the player ID is player ID. We want to make sure that we don't have a position for this player ID already, so we're gonna check that, and if we get a low row length of 0, we're gonna insert that. So that's just for security reasons. You can be sure then we don't have any player ID in there. So we insert, just easy. We're going for insert into table player pos, and we insert a player ID, the pos x, y, and z, and with the query parameters, add player ID, add pos x, add pos y, add pos z, and here the player parameters filled with the ID and the variables we have here. And after that, we just catch the database exception if something goes wrong, and we are back in our normal function we had. So that's the new part. Let's make it a little bit bigger. So from here to here. Just save a position into the player pos. That's all we're doing here. When we save the player, and then we need into the load function, go over here to the load function. So if we get a message load the player, we want to deliver also these X, Y, and Z positions, and therefore we going to make a new database selection after we get a row back so the player exists, and if he exists, we want to see in the player post where player ID is equal to user ID and limit 1, we want to see if that position we get out of the database. So we could enter a rows 2 and if rows 2 length equals to 1, so we are sure we got one. I didn't do that, but you're free to do that, of course. And later on, or down here, you just write the new positions into the writer from Dark Rift, and so that will be transported to the Unity engine. So again, after we got one row back from the table player, we just do a new select and going for the row where the player ID is equal to where the player ID is equals to user ID, and then we just write that into our Dark Rift writer. So that should be all for this part. We just get the message into the database and out of the database, and we make a new table for that because it's just faster when we have to access that. Good. And then we need to have a save position. So here comes the part where it's nice to have just the smaller table. And so we make a new player save subject, and I got the 5 for that. Let's scroll up a little and to see in the install I just added the player subject save position to 5, and also I made in the read settings over here the player save position with this part. So we save that into our settings.conf and we read that out of the settings file. I nearly forgot, of course, you have to make a variable for that, so it's another private ushort and it's underscore player saves subject save position. Good, back there we see here we are. So if we have the player subject save position, we going to using the Dark Rift reader, and we going the int, which will be the user ID and the position X, Y, and Z, and then we update the table. So we update the table player pos and set the position X, Y, and Z, where the player ID is equals to player ID query, and the player ID query is equals to underscore ID, and the pos x is underscore pos, and pos epsilon, pos y, always falling back into German. is underscore pos y, and pos z is underscore pos z. So and then we just catch the database exception, and we don't need to bring a message back because we just know that stuff will be saved, and the player or in Unity doesn't have to have the information about that. So now we have the possibility to save the position into our database. When we create the player, we can load the position out of the database, and we can save just the position later on. That's it. Finish, build it, bring it into our server. So at first we have to add the new subject into our yconst. So it's player subject, and here on position 5, player save position. So it's a public const u short player save pos, and I choose the 5. In the next we go to our player manager, and in the player manager we have the function where we receive the player data, and there we have to add the stuff so we get something out of the reader, and we added in the player plugin the X, Y, and Z coordinates, and so we have to get them out. Just remember you have to read single because float is in single, and you read that out of the reader, and then we gonna make a vector3 out of it. So I have a new vector3, it's load pos. In my case, you name it whatever you want. And it's a new vector3, and it's out of the X, Y, and Z positions of. We have to add that in our event, and since we call the event here, we just going for after my stats, we're going to add the load position here, and for that to work you have to go all the way up to your delegate and add a vector3 here on this position. So we just extend this event with the vector3 position. So in our player script we have to look for the make player function, which is fired on the onPlayer load OK event. And let's scroll down there somewhere. Here it is. So in that function we extend that with the vector3 underscore position, and we add that down here on my position is equal to underscore pos. And if we remember right, we have that transform.position is equals to my position down here in make UMA. So automatically our UMA or our player will be on the right position. On the top here we have in my position, there was the value of the starting point here. You just delete that and just have to have a public vector3 my position, so you don't need an starting value for that. So what's left is to give this position into our functions to generate the player others when you log on, so every other client knows where you spawn. So for that, it's just easy. You go to the send message to others here, send I'm new function, and there you extend the writer with the X, Y, and Z position. You just go and get the values out of my the variable my position on the player, and then you send the writer as usual. You also extend the join game, and you just go here and doing the same. You extend the writer with the my position X, my position Y, and my position Z, And of course, we have to read that also. So we're going to the spawn player function or the spawn subject, and you read the values out of the reader. So get the X, Y, and Z position here, then make a vector out of it. So it's the vector underscore position. And for that, we make a new vector 3 underscore position, new vector 3 position X, Y, and Z. And we feed that into the build others function. I put it here on this position just before the UMA data. And in the build others function, we have a vector 3 underscore position. And after we created the player other game object, you just go and say go game object dot transform dot position is equal to underscore position. So if you spawn a player, he's direct on the right position. What's missing is still the calling the functions for the movement, and that's in our player. Here in our update function, we had that in different if cases. So in the moment we just do that or we changed it to 1. At first we leave it at the speed. If the speed is not equal to the old speed, we're going to send a message. So that's the first part of the message we send, and then we set the old speed to speed, and then we check if the transform.position is not equal to my position and the speed is equal to 0. And if that's the case, that's the last run through this. We set or we calculate the delta position. So the delta position is transform.position x minus position x. So we get some value out of it. We have to, I think, later on going for the Z position also, but in a moment we're just going for that. And we check if the delta position is greater than 0, 1 float, or the delta position is lesser than minus 1 F. So we don't want to go for or we don't want to have these deltas too small, because if we do, we maybe save our position a couple of times. So we want to make sure that we get savings to our message over the network as less as we can manage. And if we have that, we're going to going to send message to others, and we going to send our transform.position, and then we're going to use our dark web writer and going for a new writer and going to set the user ID and the X, Y, and Z position, and then we send that message to server with the player subject, player safe position, and the writer. So that's the part where we save that in our database. And after we did all that, we got it to say my position is equal to transform.position. So for the next run, my position is set. Still, we have to modify or get this rotation a little bit tweaked, but that will come when we change our player controller so that rotation is also managed with the root motion animations. So errors that could happen. For one, as always, check the names, check the right positions. Best is to stop the video and type easy and slowly what's going on there, and then listen to what I'm telling. And of course, since we changed the databases, go here. You have to make sure that in your player positions there are values in there. So we go here and go in there. You have to see in your player table for the player ID and add a few values here as your starting point. Or you just delete your whole stuff here in the player and the account and make your stuff new. So that will be automatically created then. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, of course, leave a like. And if you like it even more, just as always, hit the subscribe button. And so we stay until then. Happy night shift.